Nick, I don't think it's any secret to anyone. You were registered as a Libertarian. You switched your registration to Republican. You are running in the Republican primary. Is it simply a realization that as a Libertarian, the likelihood of being elected was pretty much nil?
So not really. So, I mean, that's possible. This is a relatively older county, so one of the issues that I ran into was I'd have to convince over 10,000 people that have voted Republican their entire lives to all of a sudden switch to vote for a third party that they know nothing about and don't even have the time to learn anything about. Yeah, so there actually is a North Carolina Republican Liberty Caucus, which I joined, and I went to their first meeting over in Raleigh last year and found out that I have a lot more in common with them than I do the Libertarian Party by and large, so it was a better political home for me. And in North Carolina, there actually are 3 major politicians that actually do count themselves among the Republican Liberty Caucus. So it's not the old school Republican Party, but it's mostly younger people that are interested in Republicanism from an economic perspective, but are a lot less strict on the social aspects of what the party kind of adheres to. So switching to Republican just actually fit me better than being a Libertarian to begin with. The benefits of being a Libertarian in 2016 was a guarantee that I'd make it to the general election. But now that North Carolina has loosened up the ballot access, we're going to have Constitution and Green parties on the ballot. So a Libertarian would just kind of get lost in the weeds with those 2 parties, and it'll still be against the Republicans and Democrats. But, I mean, I fit better with the Republicans than I do anywhere else.
I would imagine that probably your closest kinship to the Republican Party at large is on economic issues.
Oh yes, absolutely. I believe in small government. I believe in individual responsibility, the Protestant work ethic. I believe, of course, low taxes. You should get to keep more of what you make. So, I mean, that fits in almost identical with the Republican Party. And I also agree with the Republican Party on the issues of gun rights. I agree with them on the issue of freedom of religion, and I agree with the issue of, on a lot of the same points with immigration.
One thing that you certainly showed up somewhat different at the candidates forum held by the East Lincoln Betterment Association was your opinion on the legalization of recreational marijuana.
So that was a very interesting question that they brought up, and I'm quite sure it was pointed directly at me because I've actually been endorsed by the North Carolina organization to legalize marijuana, NC Normal. But the issue stems larger as small government. It requires a gigantic government apparatus to enforce a prohibition on a plant that will grow in a closet or grow in the wild. So we're basically fighting a war against ourselves to no tangible benefit. All the science that disputes that marijuana is actually bad for you has been disproven time over. I've spoken with several local cancer patients that said they attribute them only being alive today to the cannabis, and I don't think we should relegate it to just medical use because it's a preventative medication. So you shouldn't have to get cancer in order to cure it. You should just be able to not get cancer at all. But, I mean, it stems back to money. Like, small government, I believe in economics. I believe in free market, Austrian-style economics. And it's costed us $1 trillion over the course of the last 45 years. And drugs are just as easy to get now as they have ever been. And so we've spent all this money and achieved nothing. Well, there's almost a perpetual cycle of, as drugs become more prevalent, the police crack down and use harsher tactics against the drug dealers, and then the drug dealers resort to more violence. So it's an ever-escalating scale of the police respond with violence, the drug dealers respond with even more violence. And if you look at the drug war from a perspective now, is all it does is keep the jails full. People are still going to be addicts if they want to be addicts, and you can still get drugs if you want to get drugs. It's supply and demand. It's a natural order. So yeah, I don't agree that it's working. So if recreational marijuana is going to solve the drug war, then that's what we should do.
You and your opponent obviously have some differences. Can you elaborate on some of the places where you and he disagree?
So one of the major criticisms I had, which actually drew me a lot of enemies with local Republicans, is he tried to impose a tax on fantasy sports. Back last year there was a big deal with the FanDuel and DraftKings are the two big fantasy sports companies. They are both based out in New York. So one of the issues was, I believe, that my opponent was trying to allude to, is that North Carolina is not getting any tax money from all the North Carolina citizens that bet on sports. We're a pretty sports-heavy state with our colleges very competitive, and the Panthers have been a very good team lately. So a lot of people were betting on sports, and the state wasn't seeing any of it. So to see a self-professed free market, small government Republican House representative proposing a tax on something for no tangible purpose. I don't think anybody in Lincoln County wanted a tax on fantasy sports. So I look at it like he was doing it at the behest of a greater power. It's no secret that he's heavily involved in a national organization called ALEC. So I think a lot of his how to describe this, his leanings are more towards that organization than the county that put him into office. So I think that's who he cares about first, and we're second. So my criticisms were of, if you're going to call yourself a small government, a Republican, why are you proposing a big government tax? It's money we don't need. We're already running a budget surplus, and it's something that our county, the people you represent, didn't ask for. So that was my biggest criticism of him that I could cite to date.
What do you see as the biggest issues facing the North Carolina General Assembly, and what would be your potential solutions to some of them?
So I think one of the biggest issues we have now is the school funding. A lot of people are very hung up on the fact we spend less by states than other states. I think it's a disingenuous argument, because it's very cheap to live in North Carolina compared to other states. We're being compared to the wages of California and Massachusetts. But I think one of the issues that keeps getting thrown out there is the school sizes, or the class sizes. I don't think that's a direct correlation to a better education outcome, is how small the class you were in. So I think what we need to do is we could have larger classes and just pay better teachers more money to teach larger classes. I think we'll get the same economic or the same education output as we would by providing a lot more teachers in a lot smaller classrooms. I mean, you get more with a better teacher in a bigger classroom than you would with a worse teacher in a smaller classroom. I think it's better for the kids that have better teachers than smaller class sizes. So if we spend $9,000 right now per student per year, you put 30 kids in a classroom, that's $270,000 the state is paying for that year for that classroom. You could pay a teacher $75,000 to $100,000. You could get a very damn good teacher, and those kids would all benefit a lot better than a $50,000 teacher in a classroom of 15,000, or a classroom of 15. So I think what we need to do is we need to focus on better teachers in smaller classrooms, or larger classrooms and better teachers. We'd save money.
Another issue that was mentioned at the candidates forum was about roads, and you had a rather unusual potential solution to some of our road problems and traffic congestion and so forth.
So I'm a technology guy, and I trust in technology and in the evolution of technology. But most people think of roads as they think of them as a means to an end, but a road is just a way to get from your house to work, or your house to the store, your house to shopping, or whatnot. All we're doing is getting from point A to point B, and building more roads has never worked, because the more roads you build, the quicker those more roads will fill up. More people will just come in, and the roads will always get full, no matter how you make them. If building roads help traffic, then how come there's still traffic on 4-lane highways? So I think the issue we need to think about is, how do we get from point A to point B in a more efficient, cost-effective manner? I don't think light rail's the answer, because Charlotte's proven that's a giant waste of money and doesn't work. What we need to consider is allowing autonomous vehicle technology to be stripping all the regulations that are currently bogging it down. It's the government that's holding up the technology. I mean, imagine how much you pay for your car to just sit in your garage most of the time. It's be as simple as, like, you on your cell phone. Everybody's got cell phones. You just type in, I need to ride from here to here, and an autonomous vehicle shows up and it takes you there, and then it just leaves. So the places don't need parking lots. It's said that about 25 to 40% of downtown areas are just parking lots, and that's very valuable real estate that we just give away for free for cars to park in. So I mentioned at the forum that we're going to live in one giant parking lot with a bunch of giant roads if we don't consider a different alternative to transportation. A lot of it's funding, but if we better use the roads we have, then we won't need to pay more for them. So I think autonomous vehicle technology, it's the future.
What do you think of the current North Carolina General Assembly, what would be your main praises and criticisms?
So I think our General Assembly does a fantastic job from an economics perspective, which is very important to me. We are one of the most business-friendly states in the country. We do have the lowest taxes of any state in the South that actually has a tax. I believe Florida doesn't have an income tax at all. We are generating a budget surplus, even with the lowest amount of taxes. So I praise them on the economic side. We do a phenomenal job. I chose to live in North Carolina for the very way that our politics are ran here. It aligns with me closer than any other state in the country, so I can't fault them on that. Some of the smaller things that are troublesome is a lot of people are still hung up on the bathroom issue, the HB2 Charlotte bathroom ordinance. I think there's a more mature way that we could have handled that, because if you look at it, the way the law was written, there was no enforcement mechanism nor penalty for non-compliance. So we passed a law that there was no way to enforce the law. It made absolutely no sense to pass a law that there's no punishment for violating the law. So why even have a law? And then another point that keeps getting brought up that a lot of people don't think about is occupational licensing. So North Carolina is actually one of the hardest states to get a job in, because so many professions require a license that has nothing to do with how good you are at the job. It's just you need to pay a government organization a fee in order to work in a certain job field, like everything from a landscape architect to a dog groomer to a locksmith. I mean, these aren't background checks to make sure you're capable of doing the job. You just need to pay a fine to a guild in order to work in that industry. So I think a lot of that can be stripped out, because, I mean, I think a barber is one of the occupations that requires a license. If I go to a barber and I get a bad haircut, I just won't go there anymore. I don't need the government to tell me who's an approved barber and who's not. I just think that's a space the government's waded into the economy a little too far.
And perhaps the most important question, why should someone vote for you as opposed to Jason Zane?
Well, I like to tie back to this. In 2016, Lincoln County overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump because they wanted to show their disdain for incumbency in people that felt entitled to their positions. So Jason Zane's been in Raleigh, 6-8 years now. He was appointed to the position originally, so he's always had the benefit of incumbency in every election. And I believe he's only been challenged once. So from my perspective, I kind of feel in the way he's sided with Alec and almost does everything they say, and I believe he's the national chairman now. I kind of feel like he feels entitled to this spot. He doesn't feel like he should have to earn it. He just feels like it should be given to him, and we should be grateful that he's in the spot. Should have to work for it or prove that he's a better candidate every cycle. So from an incumbency perspective, I think he feels entitled to the spot. And I think it's kind of, if we want somebody different, and we want somebody that's going to bring in fresh ideas and that's going to be beholden to the people of Lincoln County, especially I'm mainly focusing on the eastern portion of the county, which is now more than half of the population of the county. I think I represent East Lincoln's interests better than him, and I think I represent the county's interest as a whole better than him, because I think he's not in it for the county anymore. I think he's in it for himself at this point. So that's why I think I would be a better selection.